2024 is to read 50 books, so I'm keeping track of everything on Goodreads, and today I wanted to share with you guys all the books I read in Q1 of 2024. So that would be January through March, and I'll go ahead and read off my notes, my reviews, how long it took me to read each book, as well as what I rated it on Goodreads. So go ahead and stay tuned if you want to watch this. I have done a couple separate videos of specific books, so I'll reference this in here as well, and I hope you guys enjoy. So the first book that I read this year was called Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. And if I butcher any names, I'm so sorry. The dates I read this, so I actually read the majority of this in 2023. I read it starting September 26th, 2023, and I ended it on January 5th, 2024. So it is counted in my 2024 reads because that's when I finished it. But the majority of this I actually did read in 2023. It took me obviously several months to read this. I wasn't reading it in isolation. I was kind of reading it in the background of some other books. The reason why is it was kind of a slow start for me. The end portion of it, I did read kind of all at once, but I kind of got distracted. It didn't capture my attention right away, but towards the end, it got to be a lot more exciting. So I rated this book 2 stars actually, and I feel like I want to explain this rating because overall, I am glad I read the book, but there were just certain portions of it that I couldn't get behind, and so I'll explain those here. So I did enjoy the book. Like I said, it took me a while to get in because it was a slow start, but I'd give a trigger warning in this book because there's multiple scenes that either deal with physical assault, sexual abuse. I gave it a low rating just based on those few scenes that were in here. I felt like they were handled very poorly. I did like the overall theme of the book, and I am continuing the series. I'm actually reading book 2 right now. And in these scenes, I just felt this way because the kind of, I guess, perpetrator of these or some of these scenes was kind of regarded as a hero, but I feel like he also was not held accountable for his actions. And I know that this book is set so long ago in like the 1700s, but I also feel, or I think it was before the 1700s, but I also feel that everything was kind of just brushed aside. And so that's why I gave it a low rating. I think had the scenes been in there and it just been like explaining a little bit more about like how he felt after doing these or her response to it, or that overall it wasn't okay, I feel like I would have been a lot more game with it. But because it was just so brushed aside, I felt personally like it just is giving a bad example of what romantic relationships should look like. And I think that these characters are idolized as, oh, what a great romantic relationship. Yet there's so many flaws with them. And I feel like they're not acknowledged. And there would have been so much learning experience in describing like what the main character went through, deciding to stay in this relationship and how it evolved over time. So I definitely recommend this if you are a fan of European history. There's a lot of description around Scotland, England. If you like any sort of time travel, main character is also a nurse, so if you're into like healing, it seems like she does kind of conventional medicine along with alternative medicine because she is brought back in time. And it's definitely a romance, so if you like romance, this is a good book for you. So yeah, this was the first of the Outlander series. Like I said, I am reading the second book, so hopefully in Q2 I'll have an update for you here. Okay, second book I read in 2024, or finished in 2024, is called Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. I read this January 6th, 2024 through January 9th, 2024, so really quick read. I finished it in 3 days and I rated it 4 stars. So this is part of a series called The Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This is actually the second book in it. I read the first book last year and I just really enjoyed it. And the second book I felt was really good. It definitely did not disappoint. It follows a main character trying to solve crimes in her hometown as well. Like, I think that all of the characters are really real. They're really relatable. And it's a young adult fiction that is such a quick read. So if you're looking for a quick read that just keeps you engaged the whole time, I definitely recommend Good Girl Bad Blood, or the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and this one you get to in book 2. I would definitely recommend this if you like mysteries, podcasts. So the main character does have a podcast, young adult drama. And I think the audio version of this is really, really great because you hear like the podcast episodes, and I feel like it just gives it more depth and it's more dynamic than actually reading the physical book. So I would recommend, if you are reading this series, to kind of either listen via audiobook or do both, because then you can hear her podcast as well. All right, on to the third book I read in 2024, which was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So I started this on January 2nd, 2024, and ended it on January 20th. This one, again, I wasn't reading in isolation. I gave myself about a month to finish it because it was my business book of the month that I was reading for my book club. I rated it 4 stars. I think overall it was really, really good. I did a YouTube video on this book that you could check out if you want a more in-depth video about it, that I really go into kind of what it's about and the pros and cons and what I think of it. But overall, I think it was a great reminder of how to train your mind to think differently in order to achieve success. And I'd recommend this book to anyone who's an entrepreneur or just really driven to be successful. And I thought it gave some really great ideas on earning money and just your mindset around everything else. Okay, on to the next book that I finished, which was A Storm of Swords. So this was my 4th completed book in 2024. I started reading this on January 9th, 2024, and finished it on February 12th, 2024. So this is the 3rd book in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin, also known as a Game of Thrones if you watch TV. So I rated this 5 stars. I thought it was really, really great. Honestly, in terms of the Game of Thrones book, so this is the 3rd, I would say this has been my favorite so far. I feel like I'm glad that I'm reading these books after watching the show because they do offer a little bit more detail. I think that it is a little bit different than the show. So I was kind of thinking when I got into it that, okay, why am I reading the books if I watch the show? But I'm really glad I am. I think the 3rd book is where things start differing more than the TV show, where the other 2 were a little bit closer to the TV show. Here's where things start to split. I think it was exciting the whole way through. Even though it took me a little over a month to read, it was just a really long book. And in January, I was really growing my business, so I didn't devote as much time to reading. So I can't wait to keep going in this series. I also have an app on my phone. It's called A Song of Ice and Fire, and it goes into all the characters, all the different houses, all the different places. There's even a map. So if you're reading this series, especially if you hadn't watched the TV show, I definitely recommend downloading this app. I think it's like $4 and you get everything, and it's just really helped me keep organized while reading this series. I definitely recommend this to everyone who's a fan of fantasy, world building, dynamic characters, and if you love the Game of Thrones TV series, you'll enjoy the books even more. Okay, on to the next book I read this month, or last quarter. So this is the 5th book that I finished last quarter, and it is A Court of Mist and Fury. So this is the 2nd book in the ACOTAR series, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So I started reading this on February 12th and finished it on February 24th and gave it a rating of 5 stars. So far, this is my favorite book in the series. It's the 2nd book in the series. It follows the main character, Feyre, in a fantasy world with Fae in it. So I wasn't really a huge fan of the 1st book in this series, and I didn't know if I wanted to continue going. But I heard so many good things about the 2nd book, and it really stole my heart. So I like the romance in it, as well as getting to know the other characters in this world. I think the 1st book very closely focuses on just one part of the whole ACOTAR world, where the 2nd book, it really opens up the conversation to many other parts of this world. And I like the author's portrayal of trauma and how characters work through this. So in the 1st book, there was a lot of things that happened. So in the second, like, you do see that fallout and it's not just brushed aside. So I really appreciated the honesty here. And like I said, so far the second book is my favorite. I'd recommend this to anyone who likes kind of mild fantasy. It's not really too complicated, and romance. So romance is really heavy in this book as well. All right, on to the sixth book that I read this year, Killjoy. So this one is by Holly Jackson as well. It is the prequel to the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I read this book on February 25th and gave it 2 stars. So as you can see, I finished it in one day. So it was really, really quick book to read. I think it was like 3 hours maybe. And I did enjoy it, even though I rated it 2 stars. It just felt kind of like it didn't live up to the rest of the series in my mind. I don't think you have to read it before you read the series, nor do you have to read it as a part of the series for the series to actually make sense. It was just a novella and a prequel, and so it was kind of fun, but like I said, the other books are stronger, and I'd only recommend this to people who really like the series and just want more time with the characters. All right. Next book, Happy Place by Emily Henry. I read this from February 24th to February 25th, so I finished this one really quick as well. I rated it 3 stars, and it was a really good, quick read, great novel to pick up in between books. And the premise is a romance story, kind of like a book or a movie where you know what's going to happen, but it's still fun to take the journey anyway. I think it was fun and like a really lighthearted read, and would recommend to those who enjoy romance a lot. Okay, the 8th book that I finished this quarter is Beartown by Frederick Backman. I read it from February 24th to February 29th and gave this 3 stars. So this is the first book in the Beartown series, which is centered around a hockey town, and I was really excited to read it because I actually grew up skating. I was a figure skater, not a hockey skater, but it still felt like a little bit relatable how much they praise this sport, or how much the kids just really liked going to the rink. And I think this book is great because it's just told from multiple point of views. So you're not seeing it through one character, you're seeing it through so many characters in the town. It really does kind of come together at the end, but there are a lot of sad themes, questions a lot of morals. And I think overall, like, I rated it 3 stars because I thought it was pretty good, but I feel like, I don't know, it was kind of depressing as well, I would say. So I'd recommend this to sports fans, those who like really deep characters. Am I going? There we go. I'd recommend this to sports fans, those who like really dynamic characters, and those who like seeing a story from multiple point of view. And I have continued reading this series in quarter 2, so I'll go ahead and give you guys an update when I make another one of these videos. So the 9th book that I finished is called As Good as Dead. So this is also by Holly Jackson. It is the 3rd book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series that I've referenced a few times. And I read this from February 25th to March 3rd, and I rated it 3 stars. So other than the prequel, this was probably my least favorite book in the series, but I still thought it was good, exciting, and enjoyable read. I finished it very quickly. And it just takes a darker turn in the end, which I wasn't a huge fan of because it didn't feel consistent to me with the main character. But I thought that the ending really brought things together, and I am really glad that I finished this series. So shout out to Holly Jackson, who created a really, really dynamic and good young adult series, The Good Girl's Guide to Murder. All right, the 10th book that I finished is called Fourth Wing. So far, this has been my favorite read in the year. It really shows what courage is with the main character, and I feel like she's super relatable. Okay, so sorry. This book is set around young adults training to be dragon riders, and the main character, Violet, struggles with physical challenges, but she doesn't let this stop her, which I really like that they brought some sort of like a physical disability to such a physical thing like dragon riding. It was really empowering, and I'm so glad that there's a second book out and then a third on the way. So I was like excited every single day to pick up this book. I was captivated the whole way through, and would definitely recommend this to anyone who likes fantasy, dragons, empowering characters, or who has like a chronic illness or chronic pain, I think that Violet was just a really good example of someone who meets adversity almost every step in the way in her journey, but still fights through, achieves her goals. And I can't even say how much I love this book. So I read this book from March 3rd to March 10th. So it was only a week, but it was a pretty big book, and I rated it 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read is called Anxious People, also by Frederick Backman, the same author who was the author in the Beartown series that I mentioned previously. So I read this book from March 3rd to March 11th and rated it 3 stars. It was a great lighthearted book about people trapped in a hostage situation, and I thought it was quite silly, but also nice to see another point of view. It's like Beartown, this is written from multiple characters' point of views, and it tackles deeper topics, but it ends up being really warm and supportive. So anyone who's looking for a lighthearted yet touching read, this would be the book for you. Okay, the 12th book is A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I read this from March 12th through March 24th, and I rated it 3 stars. So this is the third book in the ACOTAR series, and I really, really enjoyed the second book, like I stated before, but I didn't feel like this one connected with the characters as much. I thought it was a good book overall and really got into the world building of this series, but I feel like it just falls short of the second, but I still want to continue the series and would probably rank this more like a 3.5 if Goodreads had stars, but because they don't, that's why I gave it a 3. And this brings me to the next and final book that I read in quarter 1, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is book 3.5 of the ACOTAR series. I read it from March 24th to March 31st and rated it 3 stars as well. Just a little novella, but I do think that you have to read this if you are reading the series. Otherwise, I feel like I would miss stuff going from the third to the fourth book. So it did further the plot, and I haven't started the fourth book, but I have heard that if you didn't read this, you are a little bit lost. So I'm glad that I read it. I would say it's not as intense as the other books, and it felt a little bit less exciting as well. And it was short, but a good read, and just a great way to finish out the quarter with an extra book in there because it was a little bit shorter. So overall this quarter, I read 13 books, which I'm really proud of because I'm on track to hit my reading goal. And actually, as I'm filming this, May 6th, so a little over a month later, I still am on track to hit my reading goal with what I've read so far this quarter. And I did fall behind a little bit initially, but I'm really glad that I caught up. And I feel like I have a different strategy now reading some of the longer books in quarter 2 to ensure I don't get behind. This quarter, looking through what I read, I think that when I read A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, because it was so long, I got a little bit behind there. And then A Court of Mist and Fury, what else was long? Fourth Wing was pretty long, and then A Court of Wings and Ruin. So had a few pretty long books in there, and then The Storm of Swords actually did exceed 1,000 pages, I believe, so lots to pick up there. And now what I'm kind of doing is if I am reading a longer book, I'm also trying to read shorter books while I'm reading the longer books so that that doesn't get pushed too far behind, or I'll just go ahead and get behind for a week but then catch up with a shorter book after. So really excited to give you guys an update. I don't know if I'm going to do like a monthly update where I say all the books in April I read and then May, or if I'm going to do a whole quarter together again. But thanks so much for watching, and please like this if you liked my book recommendations or agree with any of them or disagree but just like talking about books. And please subscribe if you want to see more book updates in the future. Thank you so much. Bye.